You've probably seen it. A company spends millions on a transformation effort. New systems, new processes, big launch. And then, when it comes time to talk about results, things get a little fuzzy. Leaders want to know, well, was it worth it? What did we actually gain? That's where today's guest comes in. Pete Hadley has spent over 2 decades in the trenches of change management. And after seeing company after company struggle to prove the value of their efforts, he wrote a blog post to tackle that exact issue. How to make the ROI of change not just visible, but measurable. In this episode, Pete shares the story that sparked his article and walks us through his practical 3-step approach for showing that change isn't just a cost, it's an investment. This is Frontline Insights, the podcast where we explore the real-world intricacies of business transformation. I'm your host, Kenneth Folk. Let's get into it. Pete, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, Kenneth. I'm happy to be here with you.
Awesome. So we're going to dive into it shortly, but before we do that, let's talk a little bit about your background. What led you to focus on change management and what inspired you to write this article?
Sure. Well, I've spent 20 plus years leading change and adoption work with Fortune 500 clients, and I've experienced pretty much everything, the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Awesome. So tell us a little bit about the article, Pete.
Yeah, so really about this article, I've seen time and time again how companies really struggle to quantify the impact of change management. It's always seen as something that's critical to the project's success, yet connecting the investment to measurable results is treated pretty much as an afterthought. That frustration really inspired me to write this article to help demystify the process and provide a few simple but practical steps for consultants to prove its value.
We love practical steps, so I'm excited to get into that. What we're going to do first is talk about why ROI is so difficult, and then we're going to talk about some steps that you mentioned in your article about how to measure the ROI of change management, and it's a 3-step process. So first, why is it so difficult to measure the ROI of change management? It feels like it's this really intangible thing. What makes it so difficult to measure?
Yeah, that's a great question. From my perspective, the biggest challenge in change management is that it's designed to reduce friction and not necessarily are we creating something new or tangible. If everything goes smoothly, the impact is invisible, and because there's no crisis to manage, there's nothing to measure.
Okay. So we're talking about preventing failure rather than creating something measurable. We're avoiding the problem before it even comes up, kind of like taking preventative medicine or staying on top of your dental cleanings, right?
Yes, exactly. Another challenge is all companies track costs, but rarely do they track impact. They know how much they're spending, but they don't have a process in place to be able to measure the business value those changes create.
I see. So can you give us some examples of, where we might see ROI being a little more obvious?
Sure. One of the more obvious places is around the sales organization.
Always where the dollars are.
Yes. So let's say a company changes its sales process and sees a 15% increase in revenue afterwards, or a 10% increase in the number of qualified opportunities they're capturing in their CRM system. That's an easy win for measuring value.
Yeah, it's always easy to track the dollar amounts, right? To see the ROI, but are there other areas perhaps where, and they may be tied to finance as well, but are there other examples that you can give us where ROI is a little bit more obvious?
Absolutely. There's always opportunities if you look hard enough. Let's look at compliance, for example. So for compliance improvements, if a company reduces its regulatory fines after a policy change, process efficiencies.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah. So if a call center improves their response time after a systems upgrade. And then even employee retention. lower turnover rates after leadership improves how they communicate or engage with their employees.
Ah, okay. So it seems like the challenge isn't so much that change management, um, you know, has that impact, but companies don't track it well.
Correct. Yeah. They don't necessarily apply the same level of rigor to be able to track those benefits.
Got it. So, like you said, if you look hard enough, you can find it. So they're there. They may just not be so upfront, right, and in your face. Before we jump into Pete's three-step process, let's pause for a second. By now, you've heard why measuring the ROI of change management is tricky and why it matters more than ever. The good news? Pete has a clear, practical way to tackle it. He breaks it down into three steps that anyone can use. Okay, so let's dive into the three-step process that you outlined in your article because we do love practical steps. So, share with us a little bit about those three steps. The first one is determining the ultimate goal. Why is that one so critical?
So typically, a company will launch an initiative without really defining what success is going to look like at the end. Let's say that a company is rolling out that new CRM system. IT might
Mm-hmm.
define success as, the system is going to go live on time and on budget. The sales team or the sales organization, however, for success, that's going to be completely different. For them, success is going to mean, hey, we've increased our number of validated opportunities by 20%.
Right. So, how do we determine what success looks like? What helps us to build that framework?
Yeah, we need to ask the right questions up front. So I always want to ask leaders, what's broken today? What happens if we don't change? What's the financial impact or operational impact of doing nothing?
Ah, okay. So, defining that success up front helps everyone to stay aligned.
It does. If everyone knows why they're making a change, it's going to be a lot easier to measure later on.
Okay. And then we're talking about measuring. So, we obviously need to have some metrics in place. And why should those metrics be set before the project starts? Because step two of your process is define the metrics up front. So, why do we need to have them up front?
We really need to define them up front because if we don't, we're not going to be able to prove we've had success later on. So, for example, if we're improving our compliance training, we might want to track the number of compliance risks before and after training,
Hmm.
or the number of regulatory fines or mitigation tasks that decrease during that time.
Got it. Okay. Okay. Um, so we're connecting all of these cost savings to help prove ROI. So instead of saying we've trained employees, you basically have to show that business impact.
Yeah, we know how much we spent on training those employees, but what's the return on that spend after we've trained them?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's interesting that, some of these metrics are not typically set up front, and sometimes we actually have to go after them to establish that benchmark before we even start so that we can track that ROI later on.
Yeah, it's a lot harder to retrofit than it is identifying those things up front.
Got it. So, step three of your process is clarifying business value over time. How do you track that long term impact?
Yeah, so really an organization needs to set follow-ups at regular points, like 3, 6, or 12 months after the project ends or goes live to see if the change actually sticks. And in some cases, that value is going to appear much, much later on. For example, one project that I worked on was able to identify after a year that they could reduce by 60% the amount of inventory they were carrying because of the level of confidence they had in their inventory reporting coming out from the new system.
That's awesome. So it sounds like ROI is not just a one time calculation, it's an ongoing process, which I think is very interesting because these things could take a while to actually surface, right? For you to see the impact and get that ROI.
Yeah, some things might show up a lot sooner than others. Other things may show up that you didn't anticipate in the beginning much later on in the process.
Right. And there's also unexpected impacts, right? Unexpected benefits that you just didn't even think about planning to track, and they show up anyway. So there's that.
Correct. Yeah. And that's why having those regular touch points, whether it's each quarter, each year, that provides you the opportunity not only to identify those things, but to show that there's continual return on investment that's being brought in.
Got it. Well, let's wrap up. What is one thing that our leaders should probably take away from today's discussion?
They really need to recognize that change management isn't just a cost, it's an investment. And to prove its value, you need to be able to define the goal, understand what success is going to look like at the end, be able to measure with the right metrics. And that means tracking the impact, not just the activity. And then finally,
Mhm.
having that follow up over time, track those benefits long term.
Where can our listeners go to read your article and learn more, Pete?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Kenneth. They can go to our Blue Skies website and not only have access to my article, but really other articles that are very insightful from subject matter experts within our organization as well.
Fantastic. And that includes articles not just on change management, but other areas as well pertaining to business transformation. So definitely take a look. We're going to include the link to Pete's article in the show notes. And you can take it from there. Thanks for joining us, Pete. This has been really, really great. For our Frontline Insights listeners, please check out Pete's article. And remember that nation isn't just about change, it's about results. Thanks again for joining us, Pete.
Thank you, Kenneth.
Awesome. That's it for our episode today. Until next time, stay curious and keep pushing the front lines of innovation.